What's going on, y'all? This is Josh from Team SUPERSHOE, and welcome back to another episode of the Shoe Show. Welcome to 2023, y'all. We have, today's not the Shoe Show. Today is the Stacked Show. We have on 4 different guests today, and we're just going to talk about some old school racing because we don't have any current racing to talk about. I have my buddies Jimmy Smith. We have my buddy Toby Christie. Joey West, and a little guy you might have heard of. His name is Ryan Sparks. They are all coming on to talk about who is the greatest of all time, the GOAT of the NASCAR'S, and we're also going to talk about the future, who holds the key to being in this conversation in the future, in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So let's bring them on. You guys don't want to see me. Let's bring on the guests. All right, y'all, we are back, and I told you we had a stacked show. Brought a panel of experts here, ready to talk about some NASCAR since it's this is going to be on January 7th, so we still don't have some NASCAR racing to talk about, but we can at least have a little bit of a friendly debate. First off, though, I got to do some introductions. A great friend of the show and a retired pit crew member of Big Randy LaJoie's pit crew team, Mr. Jimmy Smith. Jimmy, how are you, buddy?
I'm great.
Awesome.
I also drive the bus for Sparks sometimes too when Corey allows him to use it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about hiring you away though, full time. Make you mine.
I don't want to do anything full time, bro.
Well, it'd be a full time, part time gig.
Perfect. Like Darlington, full time.
That's right.
And then you can find this guy at your city. He is touring right now since it's January in Winter Jam, the drummer for rock band Disciple, Joey West. Joey, how are you, man?
Doing great. I just want to put it out there whenever this whole drumming thing's over. If any of you guys want to give me a job in racing, I'm happy to do it. So if I could,
I don't want you drumming on my hood.
Man, if I could follow something around a track every single weekend, that'd be the dream right there. So
you got the owner of TobyChristie.com. He is the NASCAR media extraordinaire, Toby Christie. Toby, how are you?
Great to be on, guys. Appreciate you having me here. This should be pretty fun. Corey LaJoie centric podcast. That's awesome.
Well, everybody's got to have one, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, and last but not least, the future winning crew chief for the Clash coming up next month. The crew chief for the number 7 Chevy Camaro, Mr. Ryan Sparks. How are you, sir?
Hopefully that win is coming sooner than later. For sure. I don't like future win in the title there. We need to change that. No,
it's the Clash. It's coming up. That's it. It's
going to happen.
All right. So I wanted to bring you guys on and talk about the debate that normally you only have with drunk fans at the racetrack, the greatest of all time. We can have it a little more civilized here, hopefully. And I wanted to kind of go through a couple of things before we talk about it. Now, with the elements of the GOAT, something to think about is it just based off of stats alone and wins? Is it based off a driver's personality? Is it better to be a tough guy like Earnhardt and Pearson, or be clean cut, good representative of the sport like Gordon or Jimmy Johnson? What about the impact that the driver leaves behind when he retires, and how he makes the sport better? Do we consider the competition, whether or not, back in the day being laps down with Pearson winning and the second place guy being, 3 laps down, versus today, day and age with the competition? It's so tight and it's so stingent. How does that vary into it? And on top of that, also comparing back in the day to now, back in the day, you used to have 50 some odd races back in Petty's day. And now we have 26 races before to qualify into the playoffs. is also some of the controversies. Does that matter? You got, Jimmy Johnson and Chad Knaus were the most recent, kind of controversial guys with like, cheating and pushing the limits. But yet you got, do you compare that to back in the day? Back in the day, tech wasn't near as stringent. And, a lot of those guys, if you weren't doing something, you're not winning those races. Finally, does the point system factor in? And that's another big topic that you'd want to have with the race fans is whether or not does the points we have now with the not chase anymore, it's just the playoffs, but does that hinder your decision whether or not you have to win it by points or you need to win it by the elimination playoff races? So with that being said, I ask you guys, with all of these kind of tough elements you have to think about to make this decision, if it is a rational decision, if you had to pick one, Ryan Sparks, we'll start with you. Who would you say is the greatest?
Gosh, it's such a tough thing to call, and it's so hard to compare these guys because they're all from like different generations, right? And they were the GOAT of their time. It's so hard to compare, Johnson to what Earnhardt did to what Petty did, because it was all great when it was their time to shine, So for me, and maybe it's because of my age and when I came up, for me, it's Dale Earnhardt, because it just, he obviously was super successful, had 7 championships, just like the others. But I don't think he necessarily drove the quality equipment that the other guys had. And just, he changed so many people and got them like involved in the sport. And like, I mean, he made it like a national, what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of something that people look forward to and people really enjoyed and followed him specifically, not NASCAR, more just like becoming an Earnhardt fans before they were just NASCAR fans. So it's hard for me to argue against Jimmy Johnson because of their success that they had. I mean, the amount of races they won was incredible. The King, his era was kind of before my time. I was a little one when that was going on. Obviously, respect the 200 wins, what he did, and that'll never really be accomplished again in the Cup Series. So it's just so hard to pick one, but it's really kind of, I think, the era you grew up in and what you respect the most. But personally, I don't think Jimmy Johnson ever gets 7 titles if Carl Edwards doesn't wreck Logano at Homestead that year. Also, supposedly there was an infraction at Martinsville one year. He probably should have got docked some points, and Harvick finished very close to him, second in points one year. And I think that could have potentially been a championship taken away. So if those things would have actually happened, of course they didn't, will we even be having this conversation? But for me, gosh, it's so hard to compare. It's like the LeBron and Kobe and MJ conversation, but of racing.
Yep. Joey, what about you, man?
Oh man, God, I can't even tell you how intimidated I am right now because like there's so much knowledge in this call, and I'm just a spectator of the sport. I grew up just loving it. For me, I mean, I'm from Spartanburg, South Carolina, so it's very easy to hear all the stories from my dad growing up around the racetrack and growing up around and knowing the Pearson family. I always would probably lean towards David Pearson being in the conversation of greatest of all time, but I unfortunately was not alive to see him in his heyday. I did get to see him race one time at a Legends race that they did for charity at the Spartanburg Fairgrounds, so that was really cool when I was in high school. But I would always, I guess I would lean towards making the argument for David Pearson just because of where I'm from and like that's like the hometown guy. But at the same time, when I think about the era of NASCAR that I grew up in and watching, I was a huge Jeff Gordon fan as a kid, and grew up in the whole like Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson era. And even though I love Jeff Gordon a lot, love Dale Earnhardt a lot, like I would probably say Jimmy Johnson just because of the sheer amount of titles that he has, winning 5 titles in a row, which I think, no one else has done either. And, winning a cup race in general is not easy, so for him to do it as much as he did and dominate the way he did while I was growing up, I would always, I guess I would lean towards Jimmy Johnson being the greatest of all time, just from a spectator, fan point of view. So yeah, I don't have as articulate of an argument as Ryan did, but so
Jimmy, what you got, man?
Well, my first pick was going to be Pearson, and then I was probably going to go with Earnhardt, but these guys got them covered already. But like Sparks hit on, everybody in a different era said something. So I'm going to go with somebody that if he was still been around, it's Tim Richmond. The guy came from IndyCars. He was the first one to come from IndyCars. And what he did, he only ran 8 seasons in NASCAR, and he had 13 wins. I was there. I witnessed in 1987 when he was sick, and he came back, and he won 2 races in that span. I remember him pushing Earnhardt down the straightaway at Pocono. So is he the greatest driver? I don't know. Ernie Irvan was another one to think about. Ernie Irvan was racing Dale for the championship. That was another championship Dale might not have won, but he got hurt, But, so I'm saying the stats that Richmond was putting up, if his other life didn't get in the way of his business life, who knows? But it's hard to go against both Pearson and Earnhardt. But I'm going to say Tim Richmond.
It was interesting too to see that in '86 he had the most wins in the season of 7 wins, but yet he still lost to Dale Earnhardt.
Right, exactly. I mean, the wins that he put up in a short amount of time. And like I said, I watched him get out of his motorhome and come crawl in his car when he was sick and go out there and compete. And that guy, he shouldn't have been walking around. He was racing.
Toby, what about you?
Yeah. The other takeaway I have with the Tim Richmond point, Jimmy, is, when he was with Hendrick Motorsports, it wasn't the Hendrick Motorsports we have nowadays.
Correct.
It was still new. I mean, the
Yeah,
team
it was
started in
Harry
84. Exactly.
It was Harry
And the team
Hyde with
started
his
in
top-loader
84.
transmissions.
Yeah, they're 3-4 years into their existence, and he's running that crazy. So
Yeah.
that's a really good argument.
Yeah.
But I'm looking around here. Ryan, you kind of bounced back and forth with the Earnhardt Jimmy Johnson thing. I don't know if you actually ever pointed on to one. I'm gonna look around everybody here, and Joey, you're wearing a Dale Earnhardt shirt. The only
Right.
driver gear that's here, that's got to be my pick at this point. My goodness, I mean, there's one guy that everybody always wears, and it's always Dale Earnhardt. And there's a reason. The guy was intimidating on the racetrack. He did whatever it took to get the wins when it was on the line, and Dale Earnhardt was in position. More likely than not, he was coming away with the checkered flag, or the guy who was racing for the checkered flag wasn't coming back without the tow truck. So and it's hard right now because these days you don't really the fans don't really like a lot of aggression anymore. It seems like they kind of want people to kind of solve things cleaner these days. But I just feel like a guy that has that kind of tenacity, that no matter what kind of adversity is thrown his way, goes, you know what, this is it. I'm going for it. I want that championship. I want that win, and dives it down in there. Is just, I think that's the guy you got to go with.
He walked the walk and talked the talk.
Oh,
He did. And, with all the feathers he ruffled over the years, I don't think he got too many butt whoopings either off the track.
I don't think he ever had one, did he?
Not that I'm aware of.
By his dad.
And while we didn't talk about Richard Petty, of course, he is always in the conversation with 200 wins, 7 championships, 7 Daytona 500 wins. He is just undefeated at everything when it comes to stats. But again, it's something that you always got to wonder, if it were all equal, because back then I was doing some of the research for stats and these different guys. And back in 64, Plymouth had a new engine in the 426 Hemi. And they told the teams, all the Plymouth racing teams, not to test at full bore, not to give it away how fast they were, and just, go qualify and practice slower and then save it for the race, and I just thought that was pretty cool. But the racing back then is just so much different than, it's a completely different sport,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in 1967, Petty won 27 races, 10 straight in that season. You're not going to see that these days. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
I definitely miss the aggression from drivers, like that attitude, the Dale Earnhardt types, the David Pearson types. I
miss drivers smoking cigarettes while racing.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy? Corey LaJoie wants to do all that, but Sparks won't let him.
Oh no, Ryan.
Hey, I try to get him to fight our way out of there sometimes. He don't wreck him when I
Yeah,
tell
you
him
do.
to.
Yeah, you do.
I hear him on the radios. Yeah, Sparks is the feisty one. Corey's the Corey's
Yeah.
the one
Speaking of smoking cigarettes, my uncle raced and modified at Bowman Gray Stadium a lot of years, and he had an old school cigarette lighter in his car, and he said that's the best cigarette he would smoke. It was under caution during a race.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Well, so to conclude that conversation, Petty and Pearson, they kind of had brought NASCAR back to the country's attention in the 60s and 70s. DW and Dale Earnhardt led the ways in the 80s and 90s, and you have Jeff Gordon kind of bringing it into the new century as the dominator. And since 2000, we have had such big competition of Johnson, the Busch brothers, Tony Stewart, Kevin Harvick, just to name a few. And the sport, honestly, it's evolving so much. It's not the same sport like we were saying from Petty's day versus Johnson's day. And track styles, rule book, competition, everything is getting tighter and harder for the drivers and the teams. And you just look at the past year. Chris Buescher won. He won, and he was the 19th winner of the year, and that tied only 4 other years in the history of Cup to get to 19 winners. And he got it closer. He won his race in only 29 races into the season, which is a record-breaking deal. So it shows you that the sport is just being more and more competitive. The drivers are more and more competitive. The teams, the everything is just getting better and getting tougher on the teams and the drivers. And
Josh, what were the other years they had 19 winners?
It was back in 56, 58, 61, and 2001.
Wow.
And I'm surprised to read 2001 too.
Right.
I was about to say
There was that little
surprised by that
section
stat.
in the early 2000s where a lot of kind of fringe teams were quite competitive. You had like the Jasper Racings were almost winning races. You had the 93 Bill Davis car was running pretty good several times in there.
Well, and Dale wasn't around anymore, right?
Yeah, once you hit 01, it was kind of open
Yep.
season on somebody trying to be that guy. So
Right.
I think that's
there was
about
a lot
the
of
time
movement.
they really started understanding the aerodynamics. And as different teams learned, and you might have a team with a really good driver like Harvick or somebody just coming in after we lost Earnhardt, and where those guys are kind of figuring out how to control your platform with coil binding and stuff like that. I think that was kind of that era where it was really going through a change. And so it took a while for some people to figure it out. And that's why you had so many different winners. But like to touch on Toby's point earlier, these cars are so similar. I don't see one company or one driver just pulling away. Like last year, Kyle Larson, he had 10 wins, I believe, or 9 or something. He had a huge season. And this year, there was times where he was a 12th place guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of guys that race on Sunday that I don't even think can carry his helmet bag. So, he's incredible. Like he's a Kyle Busch, Jimmy Johnson, just natural talent. Right. But the field is so close. I tell people all the time on Sunday with Corey, I'm literally one round off from running 15th or 30th. It is insane how tight it is. We're doing tenths of a pound of air pressure. It's crazy how close and competitive the cars are these days. So whoever just hits that perfect deal on any given Sunday, really, honestly, I think there's 28 cars that can legitimately win a Cup race now.
Yeah, like you said, with the margins being so small now, things flip real quick. We were just talking about RCR kind of being like that team that's like, wow, they've kind of really lost their place here. Then they come out this year with the new car, they win 3 races. Now they've got Kyle Busch coming in. So it's really interesting to see how fast things can change in the sport. I know a lot of people think that it's not like in the old days where if you show a little bit of talent, you get like a certain ride or something like that. But I can argue actually it's just like it. I feel like if guys do the hard work right now, like you, Ryan, you go to work and you guys find something, you just get that one little bit of the advantage. It doesn't take much anymore. And all of a sudden you guys are the ones with your foot on everybody else's throat for at least a few weeks until everybody else figures it out. So there's a lot of opportunity out there right now.
Yeah, to your point, it was somewhat of a speedway race, but we're literally 1 mile away from getting a W last year. So the possibilities are real and they're there. it is still super hard to execute a perfect day on Sunday. There's the guys that race up front are so dang good.
Well,
And,
you can say it's just a super speedway race all you want. There weren't many guys that led more than you guys that day. And I don't think people weren't not trying to lead. So
100%, I mean, those races are probably just as hard, if not harder to win than a typical mile and a half or short track, just because so many people can win at those weekends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're just one wall ride away from knocking Denny Hamlin out of the playoffs. So
yeah, that's on everybody.
Love that, by the way.
Hey, it wasn't
Couldn't happen
banned.
to a nicer guy.
That was,
that was the most
we'll be
insane
talking
thing I've
about
ever
that
seen.
in 30 years.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
like,
that was epic.
That's the thing that like whenever hopefully one day my kids are into NASCAR, that's the thing that I'm gonna be like showing them YouTube videos of like I saw this happen live. Like this was insane.
Well,
Yeah,
the disappointing part was like some of the drivers were like complaining about it.
Oh,
Right.
dude.
Even like Larson made a comment. I'm like, come on, bro. Like
Yeah.
you did the same thing at Darlington. It just
Yep.
didn't work out for you.
He
You know
tried
what
to
I mean?
cut
So
several
what's the
times.
difference?
I was
I thought it was
sitting in
pretty epic, and for sure that's a real little show for 30 years.
I was sitting in turn 4 at Darlington when he tried that. And I was like, oh man, had that worked, that would have been awesome. But when Ross did that, I was like, wow, this is going to be in the history books for a very long time. So
Yeah, it's a good move when the announcers are like they don't know what to
They
say.
have nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
that
just
was
like,
good.
what did we
times.
just see? So yeah, I was over by the hot dog stand working on my way down pit road to get positioned for post-race interviews because it looked like everything was done. It was all locked up. I was like, okay, well, here we go. And I just see this blur with smoke and sparks going by me. I'm like, what in the hell?
yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. I was like, what in the world?
And
So
the picture perfect of him passing Hamlin out of anybody, he had to pass Hamlin right at the line. That was the best,
I literally went from sitting on my couch to standing up with my hands in the air, just like, what
Yeah.
the heck? Like, dude, it was.
Well, because it's always that moment when you're watching it as a fan on TV. You're like, oh crap, man! Like, do they really
right.
want it? What would they do for it? And that shows it. He wanted it, and he said, screw it, I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens. And it worked. I cannot believe it. I still can't.
yeah, same.
Yeah. So, talking about the greatest of all time, honestly, I think that all these guys that we have mentioned deserve our respect. Because the sport has evolved and changed so much that it's not the same sport, and they all accomplish something big for their time. So whether it's Pearson or Gordon or Joey Logano of this year, it's not a easy task to do. So my final question or final debate with you guys, I wanted to know who you guys see in the field that maybe might be in this conversation in the future.
Kyle Busch.
Agreed. He's definitely a future Hall of Famer.
Oh yeah.
Kevin Harvick.
Yeah.
I mean, he's unbelievable. I mean, the guy is still, they call him the closer. He can still close some races. It's good to see him actually get a win. And obviously the future, Kyle Larson, and it'll be interesting to see Ross Chastain's trajectory after this year. They had obviously an exciting year. It'll see if they can back that up. But I think Larson's probably your best bet coming out of the Hendrick Motorsports stable, just with their history and the strength they have behind him with Mr. H. So I'd say he's probably going to be the strongest candidate for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle
Yeah,
Busch
yeah.
got a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah,
That's
the
gonna be-
guy-
I'm most excited to see him perform this
Oh
year.
yeah.
Same.
It's
I'm going
gonna
to
be
scan
crazy.
him on the weekly.
Right.
Yes.
That's the guy that when he doesn't have a chip on his shoulder, you got to watch out. So the fact that
Right.
he got a chip on
Exactly.
his shoulder now is like, man, I don't know why they wanted to do that to him. You just poked the bear. So we'll see what happens.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I was going to say Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch, so you guys covered it.
Yeah,
It's
I think
interesting.
to that point too, Chase Elliott as well. I mean, he's been pretty
Yeah.
consistent year in and year
Yeah.
out. And as long as he's there at Hendrick, I don't see that really changing for him either. Him and Larson are kind of right there neck and neck. But somebody who's kind of outside that may sneak up into this picture in the next couple of years, just from the amount of growth they've shown in the last couple of years, I think Tyler Reddick. And it really kind of
yeah.
depends on how the 2311 thing goes. But that thing goes well. He's positioned there with Michael Jordan. I mean, that's a huge brand deal there. And if that goes well, I could see him being that next guy. Who knows?
Yeah,
Such
he's
a
a gasser.
weird fit. I just don't
Isn't
see
it?
him at 2311. You know what I mean? It just, but he's a freaking will man.
Yes.
Obviously, he showed this year, but it'll be interesting. That team. I got a lot of good friends on that 8 team, and had a lot of good chemistry, and that always doesn't translate to new beginnings. So it'll be interesting to see how he takes off.
Yeah, and not to discredit Joey Logano, I think he's also somebody to keep an eye on. He started when he was 18.
For sure.
So, I mean, he started in 2009. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but 2009, he's now got 2 championships and 31 wins, so he's only going to get better.
And now he's
only
smarter.
32. He's only 32 years old too, and he's had a chance to win 3 of these things already. He's won 2 of them.
That's
and
crazy.
This time around, he was perfect in that championship race. I mean, absolutely perfect. So, that's another good point there too.
Yeah.
You always kind of forget he isn't already that guy. You know what I mean? Because like you said, he's been around forever, even though he's still so young. It's just kind of weird.
Yeah. And not to mention also, I mean, I guess Kurt Busch is now officially, retired from full time, but he's definitely going to be, inductee very soon. So I think it's, 5 years you have to be removed, something like that. So he'll be in Hall of Fame
now, isn't it?
I don't remember.
I moved it to 3, but I'm not sure.
Such a bummer to see him go out the way he did.
Oh, dude.
Kurt is a character and just funny to be around. And he was, I mean, a little crazy at times, but he was really fun to watch over the years, for sure.
It's even more frustrating when you see the wreck that caused that to end.
Yeah.
Like it's,
It didn't look like anything. It looked like your basic wreck.
Looked like nothing.
Yeah.
Well, it's just added up over the years, right? Or over this year.
Guess so.
Like with this new car, you take a 25G hit, and then you don't have a lot of time to recover before you take the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then that little one at the end finally gets you, But we're cutting up all the clips and center sections, and hopefully trying to prevent that. So
that's
good. When you look back at his season up to that point, he had some pretty big hits before that. Talladega comes to mind on the front stretch there at the very end of the last lap there. Several of these races in the closing laps, I think even Daytona, he had a pretty big hit, but he had some pretty big shots.
Go back and look at the Clash last year. Look at the Clash. He hit
that was a big one
there.
Yep.
People don't realize that. I mean, him and Amarillo too. I mean, Amarillo said that was one of the hardest hits he ever took last year at the LA Clash.
Well, those walls were concrete on the inside there.
Yeah. And I mean, I was there, and it was like, I mean, you could hear Kurt hit. It was a pretty hard hit.
Bart, you say you're working on the center sections too for driver safety?
Yeah,
not just rear clips.
Rear clips have like a different kick to them and wall thickness, and they cut a couple square tubing pieces out, and then on the back of the center section to where the rear clip bolts up, they've eliminated a few tubes and then changed some wall thickness on some others, and just trying to make it where it absorbs some of the energy instead of the driving taking the brunt of it, or the driving.
Anything with the back head of the seats yet? The foam?
No. So safety meeting a couple weeks ago, and like now, NASCAR's not really been lenient, but there hasn't been as many strict rules for like seats and how they're mounted and foam and where they're mounted, rules in place. But this year there's a couple new templates out where your seats got to be within certain tolerances of the inside halo bar on your left side, and so they're really doing their part to keep these drivers safe. And we're putting a conscious effort right now going through all LaJoie seats and make sure they're up to snuff and ready to go.
And Ryan, what about the fuel cell? I know that was a big topic of conversation on why they didn't kind of soften the rear ends towards the end of the season this year. Was they wanted to kind of make it where the fuel cell didn't get punctured or get hit in one of these collisions. Have they kind of resolved that too?
Yeah, and you think you go changing that. So the whole idea of this car is somewhat of a cost savings and also be more competitive. So you don't want to go, oh, we need a different fuel cell now, and then everybody has to rebuy everything they just bought, where they should last us several years before we have to purchase new ones. So they went a different route and kept that aspect of it the same, but the bars they eliminated, I think they did a pretty good job, and it was definitely a huge step in the right direction.
Now, with the few changes that are being made, do you think anybody can gain an advantage in that area, or do you think it's just kind of a standard thing where there's not really much to be gained there?
There's probably a little bit to be gained there with how the rear clip will deflect now with the different thickness tubes. So we'll study that and, just check the compliances of it to see if we can make an aero gain from it. So still a lot to learn and a lot of unknowns, but with the underwing, tying the whole body together, the whole body as a whole is pretty rigid. So it's really hard to get that stuff to move, dynamically like we would do in the past with the old car.
Yeah, I was actually invited out to one of the shops when they first kind of brought these cars in, and they kind of told me, hey, why don't you mess with the rear fender here a little bit and see if you can move it. And that thing's solid, man. I was surprised that those pieces of bodywork do not move at all, not like the Xfinity ones.
No, not at all. It's like I said, pretty rigid for sure.
Awesome. Well, guys, appreciate you guys coming on. This is really cool to get you all together and collectively talk about the greatest of all time, the future greats, and just to catch up a little bit on a raceless month of January. We only got 1 month left until we can finally be glued to the seats on Sundays. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks
Hopefully
for
give
having
you
me.
guys something to talk about this year.
Yeah. All right.
Get back to
Give
work,
me
Sparks.
something to write about, Ryan.
Yeah.
Right on. I'm changing my vote. I think Jimmy Live is the GOAT.
I'll accept that vote.
There you go.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Once again, guys, thank you so much for being on the Shoe Show. This was really cool to get to talk to you guys and just kind of joke around a little bit. And it's good to get this out because we're all fiending a little bit for some NASCAR. We got 1 month left, guys. So it is January, and this month cannot go quicker. So other than that, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me on the Shoe Show. If you could subscribe, like, comment, do all that stuff, share it on other social media outlets. If you haven't joined us on Facebook, it all started on Team SUPERSHOE. It's a group on Facebook, and it's really just expanded from there. Otherwise, guys, God bless and stay safe.